The Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast has been an ongoing feature for 5 years. And for 5 years, we've been trying to get this man on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. And after a long and difficult negotiation,
oh, stop.
we have finally got him on. So we'll get right to it tonight on this very special Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast, brought to you by Tempest by Weatherflow. Get the revolutionary Tempest weather system, and you too can join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The link is pinned in the descriptor of this podcast, and if you purchase anything from the Tempest website, be it this or any of the other wonderful gadgets and gizmos in smart weather fashion, use the coupon code WINTER2324, and if you do, you will get
a big 10% off. So go out and get a Tempest now.
I cannot say how nervous I've been all day about this show.
Why?
Because I'm
let me start.
I'm choked up for words here. I don't even know how to describe it.
Let me start. Can I start, Joe?
Please, by all means.
Joe and Joe.
You first of all,
First of all, I do not want to forget all the help that Joe Rayo gave me back in the day when I was at Channel 5 doing weekends. He used to send me the European maps that WSI used to produce for years because I wasn't able to get them or didn't get them on time, or I forget what the issue was. But Joe always and faithfully, whenever I asked, sent me the European. I'll never forget one set of maps you sent me, Joe. And that was when the European was probably the first model to show the perfect storm.
Yeah, I remember those days.
Yes.
I used to say to myself, my goodness, I'm sending valuable computer guidance information to the man who I'm not going to say I grew up with you, because we're only separated by 10 years.
Yeah.
But, I want to say that all of the people who are involved now in weather, or were involved in weather, people like Nick Gregory, Mr. Cioffi, Chris Cimino, Craig Allen. I mean, we all used to gravitate to CBS2 to watch you, especially during the nighttime 11 o'clock show, when you would get the late breaking stuff off of the fax machine, right, the LFM, and to tell us what.
The old LFM. I remember it well. It saved my rear end a bunch of times, especially one snowstorm. I can't remember which year, Joe. You probably would remember which. One of you two will remember. It was the storm that I had come on and up the snow amounts from what I did earlier. Joe, do you remember that?
The memory that always, like Joe, although Joe and I at the time didn't know each other yet.
No.
It's funny because Joe and I lived literally blocks from each other for years, and we never met till the year after this. There's a number of memories that stand in my head over the years with regards to you, Alan, because and I think Joe would agree with this. I'm doing what I'm doing chiefly because of the inspiration that you gave me from watching you when I was a teenager, because you were so different. You were so different from every weathercaster that was really on in New York.
Because they weren't meteorologists.
Correct. You were the first meteorologist that was on, but you presented weather in a way that nobody else did, and you offered all this wonderful insight that no one else did. Of course, they'd always cut you down to 45 seconds or even 30 seconds sometimes. But the thing was, it's like I had to watch Alan. I had to turn Alan on, and this was the January 19th, 20th storm in 1978.
Okay.
And that night when the snow started, and the Weather Service
This was not the blizzard of 70. This is before.
No, this was the first one. This was the first, the first one in January. And I watched you at 11 o'clock, and the Weather Service forecast was for less than an inch changing to rain. Not even the satisfaction of changing over to sleep before going over to rain. Okay, changing to rain. And then I remember as I was listening through the night, the Weather Service, then I was looking outside. I'm living in the Bronx. It's like, okay, well, they said less than an inch. We've already got 2. Next forecast, they update their forecast. Suddenly it's 2 to 3. Okay. And then you came on and you said that Atlantic City, which had already 6 inches of snow, you upped your amounts to 6 to 8, which was way beyond everybody else. You immediately upped your amounts, and you said something to the effect of that Atlantic City there were signs that Atlantic City was about to lose
Losing.
the
Right.
low level cold air,
Right.
but you were upping amounts to 6 to 8. Nobody was everybody else was still the lazy weather people in New York on that day were still with the coating to an inch when there was already at that time by 11 o'clock there was like 3 or 4 on the ground. And that memory always stuck in my head because the next morning, I had about 15, 16 inches on the ground. It
I
ended
wasn't
in
even high enough.
no, you weren't high enough, but you certainly were higher than everybody else. But it was one of those it was one of those moments that I guess it just really clicked with me at that, right there. It's like, this is what I want to do. This is who I want to be. And, over the years and watching and then, working with you at Channel 2
Right.
and after Nick Gregory went back to school
We have to. Joe and I have known each other for 45 years.
45 years.
That's incredible. You think about
Yes.
it. And he was just. Go ahead.
No, you finish. Finish your thought.
I was just saying, Joe was a college student at NYU, and
CCNY.
sorry, CCNY. Did you have Vinnie Cardone as a teacher at all?
I did not.
You
I
not.
did.
You did, Joe.
Dr. Vin Cardone. I remember him well.
We lost him years ago, way too young.
Yes.
Vinny was one of my dear friends. But anyway, Nick Gregory. I got Nick Gregory started. Nick worked as a high schooler in the weather office with me at Channel 2 for several years before I got through bribing some of the camera people and the tech people in the control room to make him a videotape, which he sent to CNN, of which he got a job at CNN. And then he was at CNN, I think, from 81 to about 85 or 6. Then he's been at Channel 5, Joe's, for
ever
since 86. And he repaid the thanks that I gave him by allowing me to get a job at Channel 5 doing weekends from the late 80s to the mid 90s. In fact, the last time that I was on the air in New York was in the big snowstorm of March of 94, Joe, which came up the coast and buried New York with at least 13 or 14 inches of snow. But, I also started Harvey Leonard, Harvey, a long time, good time friend of mine, at Channel 12 in Providence, because I knew the general manager of this CBS station in Providence because he lived around the corner from my sister and brother-in-law in Barrington, Rhode Island. So I got to know the guy through my sister.
That's handy.
Yeah, that's handy. I got to know him, and I remember sitting in his living room, and he said, "You got to find me a good weatherman." I said, "Take a chance on Harvey Leonard. He's really good." And of course, Harvey is an icon.
Yeah, well,
he retired in Boston.
He retired now in Boston.
Oh yeah, he's been retired maybe for 6 months or maybe a little more. I've lost track of time, but Harvey's a great friend. Anyway, go ahead.
Let me just stop for a moment. I just want to say welcome tonight to the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. We couldn't wait to get started. We just wanted to get right to it. But big hellos and big hugs to everybody on the chat board tonight. And for those of you who are not on the chat board but lurking in the background, we welcome you too. Join the conversation. If you have any questions, please put them up. We'll try to get to as many as we can. And, of course, subscribe to my YouTube channel so you don't miss shows like this, because we're on Sunday through Thursday at 7:35 p.m. and the occasional Friday and Saturday when there's a storm around. And if you like the show, hit the like button, because when we get to 100 likes, Joe gets to ring the bell tonight. Now, I want to just also
Before anything else, Joe, before anything else, we had two super chat hits, one from Barry Goldberg, a very generous contribution, and from Tony M. And he wrote in his super chat, Alan, this is directed to you. Alan, on behalf of the meteorological community, thank you for your years of dedicated service to broadcast meteorology. Thank you for being here tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show. This is from Tony Mondaro, National Weather Service Cooperative Observer, Harrison, New Jersey.
Sure. I knew Tony well back in the day. Sure. Thanks, Tony, for those kind words.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Joe. Did you get everybody on the super chats?
Those two, and I know we have one more. Leon Probitsky, who was another big fan I know of Alan's, and there's some people on the chat board tonight that probably don't know who Alan is or never had a chance to see him, and for that I have to tell all of you, I'm very sad and very sorry that you never had a chance to experience Alan Kasper, because as Joe said, in his day and on CBS in the 70s or on Fox 5 in the 80s, if you wanted to get a great synopsis of what was going to happen and a great forecast, a forecast that you really could sink your teeth into, Alan was the guy. In fact, Alan, I will tell you that I also am an alumnus of City College, and sometimes in advance of a big storm, walking into the City College weather station, somebody would come in and say, I missed him last night. What did God say?
Oh, Lord. That's amazing.
I wonder who came up with that.
Joe, I was going to say, most people don't know my story about how I got started.
And I want you to just give me 1 second. Joe Lopresti, thank you for hitting the super chat tip jar tonight. And he has a question for you. He wants to know, what was your most impressive snowstorm?
Probably the blizzard of
Had to be the blizzard of 78, right, Alan?
Yeah, it had to be 78. Yeah.
When you were standing outside doing a live shot talking about flakes the size of $50.
Yes, and saying there goes a cab going entirely too fast. All those I hated doing those live shots, and that was when they were when management and programming in New York was just getting started at putting the weather person in the weather. And so I hated standing out there and doing those things. I thought they were stupid and silly, but I made the best of them. And
when they signed your checks, you don't have much choice.
Yeah, that's correct. But anyway, I go back to the late 60s when I used to listen to a guy who was on WOR radio, was on with John Gambling in the morning, was their first meteorologist named Stuart Soroka. Okay. Stuart was a terrific forecaster and a really good guy. And I called him up once and I started talking to him, and he took a liking to me, and he said, I'll tell you what, he said, I'll pay your bus fare from New Jersey to the city a couple of days a week if you come and help me out for a handful of hours a day. And I did that, and through him I got to know all the other weather people in town on the phone mostly. The guy that I got to know the best was Gordon Barnes, the late Gordon Barnes. He's passed on now for quite a few years, but Gordon, there was a guy by the name of Bob Weaver. You remember him, Joe Rayo, at all?
I remember Bob Weaver.
Yeah.
Bob Weaver did the 11 o'clock news after Gordon was taken off the 11 o'clock news. And
Gordon got pissed off, I heard, when one night Bob Weaver showed his AMS seal, which Gordon Barnes did not have.
Correct. I don't remember that, but I'm sure you're right. But when Weaver was in trouble and about to leave, I got a call from Gordon. He said, look, there's a possibility of you auditioning for the weekend weather job here. Would you be interested? I said, would I be interested? Of course I would. Now, I had never been in front of a television camera in my life. And I did the audition and I was hired at Channel 2 in 1971. And I stayed there for the better part of 11 years until I left for a place called the Satellite News Channel, which was competing with Ted Turner's CNN, lasted about a year and a half. It went under. And then I kind of floated around for a few years. I did some small time local Jersey radio until I wound up at New Jersey 101.5 and did the weather there for almost 25 years before I was summarily shown the door in 9. It'll be 9 years ago this coming September.
Is
But
there
anyway,
is there anybody that's worked in television or radio though who at one point or another is summarily shown the door?
no,
I mean,
that's true.
Joe and I
True.
have the distinction of being shown the door together.
Oh, really?
Well, this was when we were at FiOS, and FiOS,
Right.
when we were at FiOS One News, and Verizon shut the place down.
Hmm.
So, they basically said, okay, you got 4 weeks and then you're done. So we were working together, and our last day was together, and then we just kind of gravitated right here to bring what we were doing to YouTube.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but yeah, I mean, it, you began the television at a time where
Oh, it's totally
things
different.
it was totally different, and things were starting to change too. I mean,
Right.
it was mostly a male dominated field. Um, uh, Women, they started bringing in women reporters, eventually bringing in women anchors over the course of the years, and at least in New York anyway, to me it was always more about show business than it was about quality. I don't know if you
Oh,
thought
I just
differently
thought of
then.
another person that got a job that I would have taken, but I couldn't. I was offered the job at News Radio 88 to do the weather starting in the morning drive. I forget how long ago this is, but it was before Craig Allen ever got it. And couldn't do it because I was going to do it from home. And at that point, Lou Adler, who was the news director, looked at me and said, "We can't do it because the signal will have to go through so many substations that the phone company couldn't guarantee them problem-free service from time to time. So they didn't want to take the chance. So they didn't hire me. And Craig Allen subsequently, I don't know how he got involved, but he got the job after I had turned it down because of equipment issues."
But for those watching the show tonight who are under the age of 30, once upon a time there was no internet. Okay, just so you know,
Yeah.
you had to actually you had to actually run basically wires for a
Yeah,
hundred
correct.
miles in order to
I
hook
had what
people
was
up
called an
together.
ISDN line.
Right? Yes, the ISDN line. I remember
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
So, doing television and radio, which did you enjoy more?
Well, at Channel 2 to start with, I had the fortune and also misfortune, both at the same, because of working with Jim Jensen. He was a handful. See, Jim respected my work very much, but was also jealous as hell of a kid that didn't work his way up through the grapevine and just wound up being propped up in the number one market out of nowhere. And I'll never forget, I was probably maybe 5 to 8 years in. I'm walking down the hall with him at the end of a newscast, and he said, "Alan, you have to stop stiffing me." And I really had no idea what he was talking about. And what he was talking about is that he would always sit over there in his anchor seat, ready to come up with some clever repartee that little Alan either didn't want to reply or didn't know how to reply, because I was into my profession. I wasn't into entertaining per se. And I guess people thought that he was picking on me, and we're writing to tell him that. So he was getting very frustrated over the fact that I was, quote, stiffing him all the time when it was
Well,
something
I
that.
I remember I also clearly remember watching the newscast where um, the big deal was the Channel 2 softball team.
Oh,
And and
please.
I
and
was watching that too. I remember this.
right, so they tossed to you for weather, and you said something to the effect of Jim Jensen is, in fact, this doesn't it get tough as you get older to
Right.
to,
And he looked
to
at me and he
play?
said, "No, but it's going to get
And
tougher over there."
right, exactly.
Yeah.
Why?
It was one of
That's
the very few lines that I ever used. I guess that was when I was there for enough years that I was feeling confident enough to trade barbs with.
I would, however you come up through the industry, and I mean, okay, so you certainly lucked out and you started in the
Oh,
number one market,
right
which was,
place, right
you know,
place, right
right
time.
place at the right time. And that's just incredible. That's like being struck by lightning, probably
Sure.
multiple times in terms of the odds of that happening, especially in those days, because in those days there were only, I mean, you could count the number of jobs that were available on one hand. I mean, it
Right.
was very, very hard. This was pre-cable. There was just the three networks. Maybe there was an
Correct.
independent station that had a newscast, but it was
Yeah.
very, very hard to get a job. And I'm just, he's there as the premier anchor, well known in the New York market, that he should feel that way. It's just sort of odd to me.
Yeah, it is. Well, he was insecure, I guess, in his own way. I
I
don't
have to
know.
tell you though, he had Jim Jensen, and you probably remember this, Alan, because the many times that I went down to CBS, I went down to be with Joe Whitty,
Mhm.
another colleague of yours,
Sure. Yeah.
and I remember going into the newsroom at CBS once, and on Jim Jensen's door in the newsroom there was a gigantic poster-sized picture of him behind the
Yeah.
anchor desk.
How
I mean,
much ego is that?
I mean, what person does something like that to put a picture of himself
No.
on the front door
Yeah.
in where he's working in the newsroom? And of course, everybody in the newsroom had to see that picture
Oh, sure, of course.
around or whatever.
I don't remember that, Joe, but I'm sure you do. Um, but yeah, there were some real characters. My first news director was a gentleman that eventually became the president of the network news, Ed Joyce, and he was a guy that wore suspenders and a bow tie. Need I tell you any more? And
He,
he
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 also
had
he also would have made a great locksmith.
yes, I'm sure, and he had his in his office door. I'm sorry, in his office, in his room, he had a button which he could press when you got in there that he would close the door behind you without having to get up to close it himself. It's a very mysterious guy. And I'll never forget one time, Joe, he woke me up at 9 o'clock in the morning. I happened to wear a dark blue shirt with a yellow tie. It was my affection for a Godfather character. And he woke me up and he said, "Don't ever wear that yellow tie again." Hangs
over,
up
over a tie.
over a tie. Yeah. That's the way they were. That's the way they were, you know. And my nickname around the studio was Child Star
You're
because
kidding me. I didn't know that. I
uh,
worked with you there for the better part of almost a year.
oh
I
yeah,
never heard that said.
no, it was whispered behind my back. That's what my nickname was because I started out at like 23, 24 years old as a kid, and they still thought of me as a kid when I left when I was in my early 30s. But Child Star was my nickname. Eric Ober, another guy who was under Ed Joyce, who became the president of Channel 2 News and eventually became president of CBS News. Eric Ober gave me that nickname a long, long time ago.
Did you find because I found this over the course of years. I was never I was never one to get involved in the workplace politics.
Oh God, I
Um,
never did it.
yeah, and I kind of look back at that and I think, well, you know what? Maybe if I had gotten a little bit more involved in workplace politics, I might have had my career might have been different. Maybe I would have lasted longer in some places. But at the same time, I really didn't want to do that because that meant I couldn't spend time at home. I couldn't spend time with my kids. I couldn't spend time with
Mm-hmm.
my family. You know,
Mm-hmm.
it was to me it was a no-brainer choice. I just wonder when you look back at all of that, do you think maybe I should have done? And I guess you certainly could say that about anything. I don't have any regrets about the fact, though, in hindsight, with
I'll
regards
tell you
to
what. I'll tell
that.
you what I fondly remember. I don't know if you remember this, Joe. Do you remember that I used to have a plexiglass covering over the national U.S. map and a
Yes,
plexiglass covering over the regional map? And I
yes,
put the station models on the regional map with temperatures, meaning the wind barbs with
yes.
one flag for 10 and a flag and a little flag for 15 knots and so on. I did that, and all the various symbols, the meteorological symbols. And I used to have to fight with management constantly over the fact, why do you do that? People don't understand it. I said, they do understand it. You have to give people a chance. And I used to put isobars on that map. And
I followed that when I as I started when I got doing my television career, I did exactly the same thing. And the funny thing was because I worked in Corpus Christi and I worked in New Orleans, and I did not get a problem. I did not I did not have a problem with that until I got back to New York and worked at News 12 because there's that New York mentality. They were in this sort of shell where and it's funny because when it came to weather, especially the biggest markets, New York, Los Angeles, and a couple of others were probably the last markets to get with the program and bring in the technology, bring in the weather systems that you could make the maps with, and all the rest of it. But yeah, it was definitely more along the lines of wanting. For me, it was more about the weather and the forecast. I really didn't care very much with regards to all the other nonsense.
Yeah, you're right. I agree.
And you also, Alan, actually put aviation forecast symbols up on the plexiglass for short.
I did all kinds of stuff like that, Joe. Yeah.
Yeah, that really, I said this guy's great. and I could understand the rumblings behind the scene, the corporate suit saying, "What the hell is he doing? Why can't he? Why they probably pulled you in one day and said, why don't you watch Channel 7? Why can't you be like Tex Antoine?"
Now, thankfully, no one ever said that to me. Although I did have dinner with Tex once in my life, and he was the only guy that had a martini with a cup of coffee at the end of the meal.
Yeah.
He did like his alcohol, and unfortunately, that partially killed him, I guess, years later.
Yep.
Alan, Mark Franz Sr. on the chat board, and I think because I saw Mark, you left a message on YouTube with regards to this. He says, Alan, can you recall a huge big snowstorm that busted when you were at Satellite News Channel? And I think, Mark, you said it was January of '83, which is right before the big one in February of '83. He says you were the only meteorologist that explained why the storm never occurred.
Oh, the Phantom Blizzard. I remember that was on
a 12 to 18 prediction.
Friday, Saturday.
And nothing happened? I don't remember.
Nothing happened. But
apparently, I'm sorry to say I don't remember.
But apparently,
the boundary level temperatures were too warm.
Yeah.
The boundary level temperatures were too warm, and it was more rain than snow. And everybody really screwed up on that. And yeah, you're right, Joe, because a month later we had the megalopolitan blizzard of February of '83, which kind of made up for that. For that bust.
Ken Musillo once asked, "Do you remember Harry Geiss?" He says his spelling may be off on this. Guise.
I sort of remember the name. What did he do?
He was on Channel 2 for a brief time in 1966, was known for predicting the Christmas Eve storm of 1966, the Donner and Blitzen storm, I think it was.
He's the guy who got Jim Witt his start. It was Jim Witt who saw that prediction by Harry Geiss. He was big on the West Coast. He was at CBS for only 1 year, and I think also he was. And I was going to ask you this, Alan. What did you ever think of Gordon Barnes when he would go on and give out lists or dates for big storms coming up in the next month?
I hated it because I didn't believe in his long-range forecasting technique. Now, folks, let me say straight on, I am not a long-range forecaster. I've never really dibble-dabbled into I have enough trouble with 5 days, let alone with trying to do it months in advance. But Gordon had what was the name of the Irving P. Crick. Right. Irving P. Crick used to came out with a cookie cutter book of different types of weather patterns, which he would categorize. And Barnes would always go to the book and start pointing his finger, counting off these pattern changes. And he used to come up with these ridiculous forecasts, and I hated them. I never thought they were worth a darn. They certainly weren't very accurate. But anyway,
over the course of all the the years, I mean, 50 plus years. So you the LFM comes to life
Mhm.
while you're starting out in your career. And of
Right.
course, we went from you had the LFM, the barotropic, and the
You
PE.
mean the
The,
bustatropic?
the barotropic and baroclinic, or the
That
PE model,
right, and then
primitive equation.
from there we have gone to the hell that we live in now, where we have more. I mean, the number of models that we have is just
It's overwhelming.
it's overwhelming, and I just wonder. Yet in all of that, through all of that, um, in in, uh, in all the storms that you had to deal with, certainly with that long stretch that you did in New Jersey, 101.5 came during a time where it
Right.
was a snow bonanza as
Right.
far as our area
Sure.
is concerned. And I wonder, your forecasting techniques, however, really have not changed, and that's a positive statement I'm making, because in the midst of all the chaos of all these models that can take you in all sorts of different directions, you've always seemed to be able to just sort of be zero in
Cut to the chase.
cut to the chase and get to what's really important. And I was just kind of wondering, because I follow that mentality. I mean, I learned everything I do, I've learned from you over the years, and I just wonder what you think about all this, all the tools that we have. You know, has it made us? Has it made the? Has it made for a better forecast?
I think obviously that's the case, despite all the model clutter that we have, that we are better off now than we were 20 years ago, 30 years ago, for sure. But you have to cut through the gobbledygook, and you have to go with what you see and what your gut tells you see, and then you sort through the various models, and you tend to know, and you do know what the strengths and weaknesses are of most of the models that you deal with. At least we used to be able to do that. I don't know if we can do that as well today as we used to back in the day. But you just sort of cut to the chase and pick out a path of which way to go and just go with it. And that was it. I always, when it came to snow forecasting, believe it or not, Joe Rayo, I used to always like to think that I would rather go up than go down, meaning I didn't want to over forecast. People that remember my career at New Jersey 101.5 probably remember that fondly, because oftentimes I was a little bit too low with some storms and some big ones. I mean, not terribly low, but I was a little low that I had to start raising as we went along. But I felt much more comfortable raising without talking about like that storm that you talked about where the weather service was saying according to an inch and we wound up getting 13. I was never that low.
No,
But but
but the thing was, and this is where I fault a lot of forecasters, and I saw this over the years with you, and again, I've tried to be the same way. Um, you don't just make your forecast and then walk out the door, and then you don't think about it till you come in the door the next day. Um, you if you made a forecast that required it to change, you changed it, and you changed it on the fly. And a lot of people didn't do that. A lot of people don't to this day don't do that. And that's to me is huge, because I think it makes it certainly easier overall in terms of you know making sure you don't look like a complete idiot when if the forecast is a disaster. But at the
I
same
hated. Go ahead, Joe. Go.
no, but at the same time, um, not none of us, none of us that do this for a living want to experience that deep hit in your stomach when you forecast for a big snow and it doesn't happen. That's the worst
Sure.
feeling in the
Yeah.
world. That's just like
Yeah.
that. You want to crawl in
Roll
a
into a
hole
hole.
and
Yeah.
hide.
Yeah. Correct. And it's happened to me. It's happened to all of us at one time or another. But I remember one thing I never used partly sunny and I never used partly cloudy. I hated those words. So I came up with variable amounts of clouds and sunshine. And in management, you've got on me for that. So what does that mean? Well, it is exactly what it says it means, you idiot. Pay attention.
Sunshine. I never did either, Alan. And again, that's following you. Sunshine with patchy high clouds.
Right, or
Right,
something like that.
right. Patchy clouds and sunshine.
Right.
Varying amounts of cloud and sunshine today.
Right.
Yeah.
Sunny in the morning.
Here's another one.
Increasing cloudiness in the
Yo, Rayo,
afternoon.
here's another one. Changeable skies. I used to
Changeable skies.
love changeable skies.
Yep.
That covered a multitude of sins. As long as you weren't going to be Cavu all day, you could get
Right.
away with it. You could get
Or
one
when
of
you
those
had
days.
when you had a deck of mid to high level clouds, milky skies.
Yeah, that's another one. I don't think I ever used that, but that's another one.
Chris O'Shaughnessy on the chat board says, Alan said it was going to snow. It was going to snow. I heard him call some great storms. The blizzard of '96 comes to mind.
I wish I could help him. I don't remember.
You don't remember the blizzard of '96?
No, I don't. I
Oh
don't.
my God.
How much did we get?
18 to 24 everywhere.
Oh, well, I can remember one about, I don't know, it's when my mother-in-law passed away. It was maybe 10 plus years ago, and we got 3 feet here at the Jersey Shore, over
Wow.
36 inches. It was as high as the stop sign in the corner.
Was it the Boxing Day storm?
It might have been. It might have been. Yes,
2010?
probably. That sounds about right, Joe.
It was right
Yeah.
after Christmas.
It was a tremendous snowstorm right after Christmas. Yeah.
But
I didn't need the tin cup to be sitting on a corner for that.
I was just thinking about, so for those of you who don't know, Alan and I talk quite a bit, especially in the winter months. Sometimes we talk, multiple times a day. But there was always this, and I did Jersey 101.5 on the weekends when you were doing
For years.
on the weekdays for years.
Right.
Which was great. It was my way because I always wanted to work with Alan side by side, and this was as close as it was ever going to get. But it was wonderful. So we would talk about upcoming weather events, and of course, I don't see James Davidson on this chat board because he lives on the Jersey Shore, and according to him, it's never snowed on the Jersey Shore ever. But no matter. But I'd tease Alan over the fact that I'd be sitting on Long Island, and how many times during that stretch from 2000 to about 2017 or 18, where I was getting these incredible double-digit amounts. And I would talk to Alan, and he would say, "Not a flake, not an ice pellet, nothing." And I have carried that phrase along, and I would tease him to say that, with you on the Jersey Shore, we need to get you a pair of dark glasses and a tin cup that says snowflakes and ice pellets. You can walk around catching them as they're coming
as they
down.
fall.
We had a lot of fun, though. We're still having, by the way, a lot of fun. You miss doing radio every day because I know you did that morning shift was a killer.
No, I don't remember because I'm living at the shore, and the radio station was just on the edge of Trent. It was in Ewing, which is a suburb of Trent. And it took me a little over an hour and 5 minutes. So I had to get up at 12:15 in the morning. I'd leave here by 20 minutes or quarter to 1 in the morning, get there by 10 minutes of 2. And I shifted the over at 10 o'clock, and I literally was out the door. But it was tough driving through all the snow and the rain and the fog at night, especially. There's nobody on the road, but it was hell to pay sometimes.
And they never at any time said, Alan really needs to do this from his home.
I did have it from home, but they preferred that I would do it live with Jim Gerhardt in the morning. So that's why I did it almost. I drove through some bad stuff at times. Thankfully, I never had any close calls, although I almost hit a deer a couple of times, but thankfully missed. There
was a time I did that 1 week for you where I came down to 101.5 to do it live when you broke your leg.
Right. Yeah, that was an interesting story. I was after a Giants playoff game. Well, it wasn't the Super Bowl. And we had at home, we had a tray of vegetables and dip. And there was a lot left over. So it was very cold out. I brought it in my car. It was sitting in my car. And around 7 o'clock in the morning, I said, let me go out and bring the vegetables and the dip inside for everyone to munch on. And there was a patch of ice on the way to the car that I decided to try and slide on like a dope. And my one leg stuck and the other one slid, and I managed to break it. I was crawling back to the front door of the radio station. Yeah, that was a tough time. But anyway.
I have just a couple of folks, some messages on Facebook. Frank La Salandra. He says, I grew up with Alan and I used to call him when he was on CBS-TV at night and give him the local Stamford, Connecticut weather observations. He was one of the best.
Oh, thank you.
Where is she? Where's her comment? Dave Pulaski says, I was happy to hear that you were going to be on the show tonight. He sends his best.
Yeah, my best to you, Dave. It's been a long time.
Mary Schultz says, I worked with Mary Schultz at Pix for a number of years. I love Mary. She was great. I call her the evil Schultz woman. She says, I lived in Toms River in the 70s and 80s, and I was so proud. A seaside resident was on Channel 2. We all loved watching Alan doing the weather and kidding around with the anchors. Mark Shepard says, love AK.
Yeah.
Terry Dew, I remember Alan Kasper. He was a wonderful meteorologist. And Robert Mafia says, wow. Just wow.
It's been a long time. I'm 77 years young now, folks, but I don't feel it, although my spinal stenosis does kind of grab at me these days. But that's something that I have to live with. It's part of getting a little older.
What's your view
You
shouldn't feel bad. Joe, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Alan shouldn't feel bad. He said earlier about being shown the door at Jersey 101.5, and he probably could still be there, in my opinion. He should be there still. But, unfortunately, there are a lot of mentalities in the television and radio business that feel that youth needs to be served. But we just lost this past week one of the greats in broadcast newscast, Bob Edwards of NPR. He had the morning edition on NPR. He was lauded. He got so many different awards, was respected by almost everybody in the radio business. And then suddenly in 2004, somebody, I guess, some suit at NPR called Bob Edwards into the office and said, Bob, you're a great guy, but we're sending you, we decided to make some changes. Why? Yeah. Why? But, so it's Alan, it's not just you or me or Joe. It's all over. Once you reach a certain age, in the opinion of the dummies who run this industry, they feel, okay, you're out. Let's bring somebody else in.
Well, my situation, Joe, was a little bit of an extenuating circumstance. What was coming around was when the internet was really bursting forth, and they wanted me to provide them with more stuff for online. And the bottom line is, it wasn't my bailiwick. I never said no. Now, they knew my feelings that I wasn't crazy about doing it, but I never said no. So they never could say, we're letting you go because. But that's why they hired the guy that they hired, because he was young and he was able to provide them with more stuff online. And now, from what I understand, he's overburdened with stuff online and hates it. So
exactly.
Well, that's what's happened now to most weather people, because when they're working, once upon a time was you prepared for a show, you did your show, and you went home.
That was it.
Those days are long gone.
I remember, by the way, I thoroughly enjoyed Lee Goldberg. What a great guy. And he certainly...
Yeah, he was fun to have. He was really great.
He certainly intimated that by all the extra stuff that he has to do.
Well, he said he starts at 9. He has a conference call at 9 in the morning.
Right.
And then, of course, the show starts at 4 o'clock. You're on. I mean, on a regular newscast, when you worked at Channel 2, you had the one newscast. It was like 10 of 7, I think it was. 6.
Well, no. Oh, you mean my one report? Yeah, it was about 6:45, 10 of 7. Yeah, I was the last thing on the show. They always save the weather list.
Right, because that's what everybody wanted to watch, so they kept it to the end. That's the reason why they put the milk in a supermarket at the far end of the store to make you walk the whole store in order to get there.
Get there, right.
But yeah, now you're on every 10 minutes. The newscast is 3 hours, and then you still have to do the 11 o'clock show. So there's that.
Right.
And while, in between, you're doing Facebook, you're doing Facebook Lives, you're doing, stuff for the websites, you're doing all this other, it's nuts. I remember when I was freelancing when I was freelancing at News 12, like in 2012 or 2013, and you had to do all this stuff. And Joe, I think you probably had to do the same thing where the forecast had to go on, there was this, I don't even know how to describe it, but it was all these steps you had to do. And there was that. And then there was something else that you had to do for traffic and weather or something, or whatever it was.
It was an overload after a while. I mean, at News 12, News 12 was easy peasy when I first got there in '95. Did 2 shows, that was it. Then all of a sudden, there was a 3rd show. Then they got the traffic and weather channel. So now we had to record that. That was channel 61. Then Facebook came along, and we had to put a certain number of reports on that, and Twitter. They fired, actually, at News 12. They fired a very good reporter because they wanted him to use Twitter more. They said, we want at least 5 Twitter reports from you. And he said, I'm doing enough already. I'm putting together.
Overloaded. Right.
I'm overloaded. And what happened? They called him in. Well, you don't want to do Twitter? Goodbye. You're gone. It's crazy. And that was one of the reasons why Bill Corbell, another friend of ours,
right,
at News 12 Long Island, he just finally said to me one day, he said, I got to get out of here. It's just it's too much. It's nuts. And that was on a regular day.
Yeah.
I mean, when we had severe thunderstorms, severe weather, and the stuff was coming in, a watch here, a warning there, they expected you to do all of that stuff, and they couldn't understand. It's Joe. I agree with you now. I'm so happy I'm out of it.
Joe would lament over the fact that he wasn't working. And I totally understand it. And I always came at it from the fact that this is what we're doing is what we're doing, and we're happy doing it. We're not in the midst of all that nonsense anymore. We don't have to answer to a corporate head. We could do whatever we want, whenever we want. I mean, could we do this show?
Let me talk about a corporate head. There was one guy at News 12 at Cablevision, actually, and he was the resident bean counter. And one day he came in and he said that he wanted a specific weather graphic on the WSI system done like yesterday. And I sat down and I said, look, it's a very complicated, it's a fly through where you fly through and the numbers pop up and everything works. I said, it's very difficult. It'll take me at least a couple of days. It was on a Thursday, I remember. I said, I will have it for you on Monday. And he turns to Norm Fine. We all remember Norm Fine, right, Joe?
Yes,
Norm Fine was in the same room. He turns to Norm Fine and says, so now it's Monday? I wanted to just take my fist. They don't understand. They never understood. And like I said, Joe, you're right. I was very upset when FiOS went out. And the thing that got me upset, and Alan, I think one time we were on the phone together, and we were talking, and that was when FiOS asked me to come over to them after I left News 12. And he said, Joe, you're in your 60s. He said, that's very, very unusual. That's very rare that you're being asked to come in your situation. And it was. And after FiOS went south, I actually said to myself, I said, well, there's no problem. I said, I had all these Emmy nominations. The AP gave me first place as a weathercaster in 2015, and all these awards that you see behind me here. I said, I'll have no problem at least getting a part-time job. Every single station in the tri-state area wouldn't even open the door for me. They wouldn't even open the door. And at some stations, like with Nick Gregory at Channel Fox 5, Nick wanted me, very much to come to Fox 5 and be there on staff, even in a part-time basis. But the head guys there said, no, sorry.
Can't afford it.
They looked at my CV and they said, oh, look at this. This guy, when did he get his job? Nick, he said, You're asking me to bring in a guy who graduated during the Carter administration. We can't have that. We can't have that. So there you go. TV is more interested in the packaging as opposed to what's inside the package. You could be the greatest synoptic weather forecaster in the world. You could have a 99% record on forecasting. It doesn't matter to them because they want something that's nice, young, pretty. Oh, and P.S. also doesn't ask for a lot of money.
Correct. Yeah.
That's it.
That's funny. I'm digressing now. Remembering a few funny stories. One, when I was on the air with Rollin Smith and Dave Marish, that was called In the Newsroom,
right?
At 11 o'clock, and Rollin Smith before me reads a long story about how Robert Hall, the clothing store, has gone out of business, and he turns to me and he said, "Alan," which leads us to the question, where are you going to get your clothes from now on? And it just broke up the whole place. And I forget what kind of stupid, foolish answer that I answered with. But
well, I think the jingle was when the prices go up, 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 up.
Right. Robert Hall goes down, down, down.
And the value goes down, down,
right,
down.
right.
Robert Hall will show you the reason we give you at quality.
Very good, Joe. That's exactly how it went. You're right.
Don't ask me what I had to dinner. That I have no idea.
I remember you talk about Dave Marish and Rollin Smith. There was a time, Alan, you were calling for a big storm, and you were talking about the fact that in New York, that the warm air advection from the ocean was going to come in and change the snow to rain. Right. And then you added, but if we have a low pressure system that intensifies and cuts off that warm air, I'm going to be in big, big trouble. You threw it back to the desk, and Dave Marish had this look on his face and said, "So what else is new?"
Yeah. A brilliant guy, but he was a strange guy, but he's brilliant. Yeah.
He wound up going back to Washington, D.C., right?
Yeah, I don't know. He's probably retired, I would assume, by now. I'm not sure. And I know Rollin probably hasn't been working in the business for quite a long while. And, of course, Jim Bouton died.
Yes.
The former Yankee pitcher who was the sports guy on the 11 o'clock news at Channel 2 for years. He passed away years ago. I forget from what, but anyway.
I love Jim Bouton. I love Jim Bouton because he was the only one of all the sportscasters who would show pro wrestling highlights of Madison Square Garden.
Oh, I don't remember. Did he, Joe? I wouldn't be surprised. He did not do stuff in the mainstream. He did what little mainstream he had to do, and if he could diverge to pro wrestling, yeah, he did. I remember that.
Alan, you worked with Ron Swoboda?
Yes.
And I worked with Ron Swoboda.
I also worked with Tom Seaver.
Did you?
Tom Seaver did the did the sports on Channel 2 and on weekends for at least one summer. And he was a super nice guy. I remember meeting his beautiful wife. I think her first name was Nancy.
Nancy Seaver, yeah.
Nancy. And he always used to smoke cigars and used to have a rip-roaring good time. And I remember Jim Nance very well, not because I worked. I forgot to say that I did work on the network. I did do the CBS Morning News.
I remember
nationally for a few years, mostly filling in for people. But I got to know Jim Nance pretty well at the time, although he was just barely starting out at that time. And I think I remember I said on the air during my report, and Charles Kuralt, the late Charles Kuralt. Do you remember him, Joe? He used to do On the Road features for years at CBS. A very respected and a wonderful guy. But I said, and in Dothan, Alabama. And when I was all done, he said, "Alan, it's pronounced Dothan, Alabama." Never forgot that. But he did it in a nice way. Funny stuff.
I remember John Coleman on Good Morning America. He once said something to the effect like it says, "And there's a lot of snow falling right now in Islip, New York. There's 7 inches."
Yeah, Islip.
Islip. That sat well with me.
Yeah, I'm sure. Anyway, listen. Yeah, but we talk a little bit about the weather now, the local weather. The hurricane season coming up. No, I don't have any long-range predictions, but I do know that supposedly the El Nino is winding down to the point of extinction come summertime, by summertime. And that with the incredibly warm ocean waters in the Atlantic to the Caribbean Sea may mean a very active hurricane season coming along the pike. Whether that means any strikes, who knows? But
the El Nino last year didn't
really affect it at
didn't
all.
affect it at all. And Joe and I have talked a number of times over the last few months about how things have been kind of weird lately in the weather world. Things that rules
you don't expect to happen that there are happening.
Right. Well, there's the El Nino and the hurricane season. That was one of them. The big rain events back in December. I mean, we seem to be getting these more and more of these.
Can we put an end to the talk of the California drought now, you think?
Yes, I think we could do that. The entire state on the drought map now is just white.
Of course, if you watch the Weather Channel, the Sierra Nevada is still only 75% of capacity. Shut up.
What do you think about all of that, though, with respect to this? I don't watch the Weather Channel. I don't watch any of the weather channels, because now there are 3 of them.
I put it on to get a local radar or the local forecast, which, of course, I get sick of hearing Jim Cantore voicing over the local forecast. I don't know how they do that, but his voice does the forecast. But I do watch a little bit. I'm not a regular watcher, and I don't deeply delve into it that often. But
they have his voice. It's automated.
How do they do it?
He must have read a whole slew of combination of words, and then the computer just puts it all together.
Out.
And now with AI, with artificial intelligence, they could probably just make a copy of Jim Cantore and have a deep fake do it. That's another thing that's going to be happening over the next number of years is the fact that AI. I mean, they already have an AI bot that's working on weather models and trying to outdo the weather models. And from what I understand, it's actually not doing a fairly good job at it. But at the end of the day, you're still going to need that person that knows the local area that they're forecasting for. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Because I don't think a machine is going to know that it always changes
idiosyncrasies of the local area.
Right.
Sure.
Right. And every single intricacy of every single area, and there's thousands of intricacies, especially what we saw last week with that skinny band that's set up just north of 195 and south of 78. And of course,
it wasn't over me. I only got 2 inches.
No, not a flake. No, you got 2 inches out of that.
A big deal. It all happened. It didn't even start till after 2 a.m. and by 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning, though still snowing. That was basically it. That happened all in 4 or 5 hours, and I got my lousy 2 inches. But of course, you look at the pattern that we're in now, Joe. It still wants to eventually try to go to trough in the west, although we have a trough that keeps digging down from Quebec down into the eastern states or the northeast. That doesn't help snow lovers at all.
No, and neither does having a trough that wants to keep digging down from Alaska down into the West Coast. That doesn't help. Right. That doesn't help that cuts off all the cold air.
Sure, and has been keeping it out of here for a while. Anyway,
let me just really quickly, David Fuller, thank you for hitting super chat, and he wants to know any chance of Alan joining the Joe and Joe show every night.
I would think this is it's not going to be my only appearance, but my occasional appearance, but not on a regular basis.
Yes,
you get tired of me after a while.
No, never. And he also says, glad you're here. Missing Alan on 101.5. Gary Crosby, thank you. You guys are the best forecasters in the business. It's very, very kind of you to say thank you. And Brandon Doherty, who's in Delaware, says, glad you were on the show, Mr. Kasper. And Ken Busillo also hitting a tip jar. Joe Lopresti, very enjoyable. So that's good. We get to have lunch tomorrow, Joe and I. Well, we've been. This is the thing I tried to, I think Joe Rayo, you now realize the fact that, he's come around to the idea that We have our show. We do what we want. We say what we want.
Well, I always knew that.
Yeah.
I was always reluctant to go on because I figured, what could I possibly say that would be that interesting? I don't know.
Oh no.
It's funny when I first retired and Joe Cioffi was talking about getting into this line of work, podcasting. I said, no, I had no real interest in sharing my opinion because not that I didn't have people interested in what I was going to have to say, but I didn't realize I did realize how much work it was involved. And I said, once I'm retired, I'm staying retired. And Joe Cioffi and Joe Rayo, certainly Joe Cioffi, will tell you how much work he has to put in every day to hover over this thing. And
but you know what the difference? But the big difference for me, it's not for everybody to do. The big difference for me is that this was my creation. So all of the things that I do online are all mine, and not having, I'm not commuting, okay.
Right.
And when I was working at FiOS, I was driving 130 miles round trip every day. And then, with tolls and everything else. And I sat down and figured out that over the course of a year, I spent 6 weeks, over 6 weeks of every year in my car.
Right.
And I was like, that's 6 weeks
You're
of my
not doing
life.
that anymore.
No.
Right.
And the thing is, it's mine. I work at, I do it because I want to do it. It's for me, it's, it gives me something to look forward to, something to do. It's my creation. And, not that it doesn't have its headaches, it does, but I really care about it. It's really important to me. It's not a company I'm working for who's paying me. I kind of did a little bit of math along the way, and relative to how much money, a television station brings in terms of revenue for a newscast, let's just say, from advertising, all right? They're paying the weather person like 4 cents on every dollar. I mean, that's really what you're getting, is like 4 cents on the dollar. Not that I'm pulling in millions, because God knows I'm not. But the thing is, it's everything that I produce, I reap the fruit of. And, I'm very proud of that. By the way, Dan Zaro's on the chat board, and he hit super chat. Thank you, Dan. And he says, this conversation is amazing. 3 legendary meteorologists. Thank you for all the inspiring and teaching me so much over the years, Alan. You look and sound fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And so I mean, for me, it's a joy doing this. It's my show. Well, it's our show. It's Joe and ours, but it's our show.
Right.
Right, yeah. Joe Rayo, it's our show.
It's our show in terms of the title, but I will say that Joe does most of the work, most of the behind the scenes is done by Joe. And I really wouldn't, I got to tell you that after I went from News 12 over to FiOS, I was really in a down mood, but to have this guy with me now, we had been trying for years to work together. And once we got together, he said, don't worry about it. It's going to be a blast. And it was. And then we got kicked out of FiOS when they shut down. And he said, don't worry about it. We're going to have a blast continuing with this show, this internet show, this YouTube show. And it gives me something to look forward to in the evening after dinner. Oh, we got the show. And,
you don't have to worry about falling asleep in the chair.
Exactly. Now, if I could only get you to draw your snow maps down to Delaware and Virginia, I would be a very happy camper.
That's the next thing that we'll have to work on.
Right. Yes, my wife Mary, Ellen, I've been married to for going on, it'll be 43 years in May. I certainly don't do it every night, Joe Rayo, but occasionally I'll start to nod off. But she's always turning around from the couch in front of me, saying, you fell asleep again. You fell asleep again. I said, what did I do today that I had to fall asleep? I'm retired. I understand. I said, I ate a big meal. This is a natural occurrence. All the blood goes to your brain and your stomach, and you start falling asleep. It's a natural.
It is.
And the other reason I'm happy that I'm doing what I'm doing, Alan, I don't know about Mary, but all of those years that I was on News 12 or in FiOS, when we had big snows, you know who had to be stuck doing the snow blowing, and we have a long driveway and a lot of stuff to plow. If my wife was the one who had to do that. Now that it's been going on like 5 years now, I'm out there with the snowblower, but I'm happy. You say, "Oh God," but I'm happy. I'm trying to make up for lost time. All of those times that and especially when I had to come home, I call her up. I say, "Did you blow out the driveway so I'd at least get up the driveway and get off the street?" And she'd be out there at like 11 o'clock at night with a snowblower, blowing and getting rid of all of that snow. So I'm happy that
Alan,
I have.
it should be noted, Alan, that his wife can fix a chainsaw.
Yeah, she can. I can't change a light bulb, but she can do that.
Oh no, his wife is amazing. Renata is amazing. She fixes.
Oh, Joe Rayo's wife. I'm talking about
Joe Rayo's wife. She changes the headlights on the car. Does she change the oil too?
She could probably do that if she
Right.
we've stopped that. When I got married, her father, who was very big into mechanics or whatever, he used to look down his nose at me. He said, "What do you mean you don't know how to change the oil?" And so for the first 10 or 15 years of our marriage, whenever it was time to change the oil, guess who had to go underneath the car with the jack stands and change the oil to make him happy? Finally, I said, "Oofa, I'm done with this." So now I get the oil change at the dealership or whatever. Probably that's what makes him hate me even more. But yeah, she's amazing. I say to everybody, I said, she's my rudder. So I mean, I don't know what I would do without my wife. And Alan's been married 43 years. We're going to hit the big 4-0 in our marriage, Alan, in September. So
Alan, is that's Zeus?
That's Zeus.
Hold him up a little higher to the camera. There he is.
That's Zeus, one of our two cats. He's about 5 or 6. He's a red point Siamese. He's nuts. He's a jumper and a talker, and he's wonderful. And he is bonded with me more than he's bonded with Mary, which drives my wife to distraction because he always comes to me more than he does to her. But we have 2 cats. The other cats, I'll put them down. The other cat we have is Boston. I didn't name them. We got them through a shelter. All of our cats we've had over the years have always come through the animal shelters, and they were named for us, but we love them to death. Anyway.
Before we wrap it up, I got to ask you because everybody was going to want to know this. Are we done for the winter? In your opinion?
Now I don't want to say for sure because, of course, as soon as I say one thing and the other thing turns out, people always say, "Oh, yeah, such a great forecast. Look what he said," and it was wrong. I tend to think that we're done. I mean, we could always have an exception to the rule between now and even early April. We've had some big snowstorms, Mr. Rayo, as you well know, in early April. But the pattern is so lousy, and it just keeps reverting back to troughs in the west and a trough in the east. It doesn't do us any good because it's too far in the east.
Right.
It doesn't look good. Let's put it that way. It doesn't look good. I don't know if we're done, but I think we're getting close.
I stated this yesterday in case whoever wasn't there. Could another short window open up where things line up to happen? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
It can happen any time between now and early April. But you have to. But I agree with you. If you look at the pattern, the way it's been,
terrible.
If a window opens up, it's going to be short, and it would have to be It would have to be perfect. I mean, these 2 storms that we had this month, they both. I mean, we really were pulling teeth to the very last minute.
Yeah.
And depending on where you are, some people did really well, and other people didn't do quite as well in terms of snowmass. Yeah, I tend to lean more on the idea that it's a long shot. It's a long shot. And Joe,
what do you think, Joe Rayo? Joe, what do you think?
I think we have one more shot. I said this would be a winter of alternating patterns. Unfortunately, for the winter weather lovers, it's been like a ratio of 1 to 3. 1 good week versus 3 warm weeks. But I think we have one more shot of cold air, another shot that at least enough so that we can get Central Park over 10 inches for the winter season. We never put together 2 consecutive winters at Central Park where we've had less than 10 inches. We had 2.3 last year. So I think we have I don't know when it's going to happen.
Right. If it's going to
Mid or
happen.
late March, I don't really know, but I think we have one more shot of cold and maybe one more shot to get some
Yeah.
snow. So we'll see.
Of course, I've had only 3 total at the
Oh,
Jersey Shore.
well, you got
2 and 1.
2 and 1.
Yep, 2 and 1. That's
That's-
it.
That's shoe polish. Now, if you had
It's
three,
fun.
now if you had 3 and 1, then it'd be oil.
Correct. Listen, it's been great fun being with you too. Of
Yes,
course,
it has.
Joe Cioffi and I talk too much to be considered the obvious. We talk constantly all the time.
Yeah,
If I'm
we
not
should have
bothering poor Joe, Joe's bothering me. No, I'm not kidding.
Well,
We
it's
talk
either
all the time.
either we're
I love
talking
you
weather.
dearly.
Same here, pal. Always. And if we're not talking weather, we're talking Turner Classic Movies and channeling Thelma Ritter as best we can. Correct?
Thanks for having me on. I enjoyed, folks.
Well, I'm glad you finally said yes, and
Yes,
you're
you.
always welcome to. You know what we're going to
Yep.
do? And obviously, the chances of it happening in the next few weeks are probably pretty low. Well,
If
God
we get
willing,
some,
next winter, get a big snow. If there's a big
or
snow
even if
threat,
this one, like Joe Rayo said,
if
something
something
pops up,
pops up,
I'll
we'll
come
get you
on.
back. We'll get you back on, and then I'll show
Okay.
you how to put maps up.
Okay, very good.
I got him on Zoom. It was like it's great. We got. All right. Thanks everybody for being here tonight. And
Good night, all.
good night. And Joe and I will be back tomorrow night.
Tomorrow night at 8 o'clock tomorrow night.
8 o'clock tomorrow night. Okay, so
8
back
o'clock.
at 8 o'clock tomorrow night, folks. That's it. Did you ring the bell?
No, I didn't. I'll ring it right now. We're at 133 likes. Thank you all. Thank you to Barry Goldberg, Tony M., Leon Probitsky, Joseph Lepresti, Gary Crosby, who hit the tip jar more than once, Ken Musillo, Brandon Doherty, David Fuller. Hey, we never get this many super chat hits with just the two of us, Joe. Must be because we had a big star tonight. John Lightman, Dan Zarrow, Izzy D., and Scott Pell. Thank you so much.
Nighty night,
Good
everybody.
night, all.